Hello and welcome to today's video. This time I've chosen an article about technology and how it might affect our everyday lives in the future. The title of the article is San Francisco Launches Driverless Bus and Taxis. I'm going to begin reading, and if you want you can follow the text online, or if you prefer you can download it later and read it at your leisure. It's available in the video description underneath. So let's start with the first paragraph. The city of San Francisco has announced the launch of a pilot program that will introduce driverless bus and taxi services to the public. The program, which is a collaboration between the city's transportation agency, the California Department of Motor Vehicles, and several private companies, aims to test the feasibility and safety of autonomous vehicles on the city's streets. So, if we begin by looking at the first word I've highlighted here in yellow, it's the verb launch. Launch is a regular verb, so in the past it's pronounced launched, and there are several different meanings for this verb. One that I can think of is connected with space. Quite often, different space agencies around the world, whether that be NASA or the European Space Agency, or more recently, the space agencies of India and China, they have launched many satellites and rockets into space. So that means that the rocket takes off and travels through the atmosphere into space. It has been launched. Obviously, in this case, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the launch of a pilot program. So this is a little different. This is when we are talking about the beginning of something. When a project is initiated, it is launched when it begins. Similarly, we often see this verb used when we're talking about the premiere of a movie. So if the movie is launched, it means that it's just come out. People can go and see it. Also, we use it with books, a book launch as well, with a similar meaning. Okay, so let's move on to the second word here. We have feasibility. Feasibility. So this is a noun. The adjective would be feasible. Feasibility is the noun. And basically what we are talking about here, when we are testing the feasibility and safety of autonomous vehicles, is that we are, or at least the California Department of Motor Vehicles, is trying to find out if the use of these vehicles is practical. Will it be feasible to use them? Will it be very problematic, or will everything go smoothly without any big issues? So if the second case is true, then we would say that this is a feasible proposition. It is possible, it's practical and safe. So let's move on to the second paragraph. The driverless bus service will operate on a fixed route along Market Street, one of the city's busiest thoroughfares, and will carry up to 12 passengers at a time. The bus will be equipped with sensors, cameras, and GPS to navigate the traffic and avoid obstacles. The bus will also have a human operator on board who can take over in case of an emergency. Okay, so the first word I've highlighted here is the word route. This is used as a noun in this case, and if we're talking about buses, then as you know, if you have buses in your city, then usually they follow a fixed route. They go along the same roads every day. Sometimes they go one way and then they come back, or sometimes they go in a circle. This is a route. It's a predictable path that the buses take. In American English, I think it's usually pronounced route, but in British English, we pronounce it route. Okay, so let's move to the second word, thoroughfare. It talks about one of the city's busiest thoroughfares. So, one important skill when you're reading and trying to understand all the words that you see is trying to work out the meaning from the context. So, from the other words that you find in the same sentence. If we look at this sentence as a whole, we are talking about the bus route, and we're talking about a street, Market Street. And this clause here basically gives a little information about this street. So one of the city's busiest thoroughfares is basically another way of saying busy street. It's a slightly fancier way, or slightly more obscure way of talking about street or road. The next word we have here, this is an interesting one. This is a phrasal verb. As you may know, phrasal verbs are 2 or 3 part words which are used in combination. Usually they have a very specific meaning, sometimes very different from the base verb, which is, in this case, is true because usually we use this phrasal verb in contexts where, for example, in a job, if somebody is sick, then maybe one of their colleagues has to take over for the day. In other words, they do their job because their colleague is sick. Somebody else has to do their job. They have to take over. Like most phrasal verbs, it does have more than one meaning. Another meaning is used in economics when a big company or organization buys a smaller company. We say that it has been taken over, which happens a lot in business. Happened with in technology in particular. Facebook and Google, being very big, very rich companies, they've taken over or bought a lot of smaller companies. Instagram and WhatsApp, to name a couple. But in this case, it is the first example. So if there is a problem or a danger because the bus is not operating correctly, then the human operator, in other words, the driver, will take over. He will hold on to the controls and take charge of the vehicle. So let's move on to the next paragraph, third paragraph. The driverless taxi service will offer on-demand rides to customers who can request a vehicle through a smartphone app. The taxi will pick up and drop off passengers at designated locations and will charge a flat rate of $5 per ride. The city hopes that the program will help reduce congestion, emissions, and accidents, as well as provide more mobility options for residents and visitors. So we have 2 more phrasal verbs in this paragraph. The first one is up here, pick up. Now, as I told you just a few moments ago, phrasal verbs have more than one meaning, and this is no exception. Probably the most common use of the phrasal verb pick up is when you take something in your hand and you pick it up. So if I take a pen from the desk, I pick up the pen. Here, however, it's used slightly more figuratively because you're not literally picking up something with your hands. When you go in your car and perhaps you go to the airport and you pick up a friend who's just arrived to visit you, basically you're collecting them. So you're driving to the airport, meeting your friend gets in the car, and then you drive somewhere else. You're picking up your friend. That is the usage that we are talking about here. The taxi will pick you up. And the other phrasal verb, drop off, is simply the opposite of that action. So if I pick up my friend from the airport, maybe I would drop them off at the hotel. So I drive to the hotel and I leave my friend there. So these 2 verbs are commonly associated with transport, particularly taxis. Okay, so let's move on to the final paragraph. The city's transportation director, John Smith, said that the program is a milestone for the city and the state. San Francisco is proud to be at the forefront of innovation and technology in transportation. We are excited to partner with the state and the private sector to bring this cutting-edge service to our community, he said. So we have two final interesting words to talk about. The first one is milestone. Milestone. Now, this one has quite an interesting history. If we go back in time, when we talked about milestones in the UK, for example, many years ago, they were literal objects. They were stones that you would see next to the road, and on the stone was written the distance to the next town. So if you were riding along the road on your horse and you came across a milestone, it might say London 20 miles. And this would indicate the distance you would have to travel in order to reach that town or city. Nowadays, the word is used figuratively. We don't have stones at the side of the road anymore. We have signs made of metal and plastic. But we still use the word. But the meaning has changed slightly. Now it's not a physical thing. It indicates something important, something that should be remembered in history. And obviously, in this case, he's talking about the introduction of this new technology, and he's saying it's a milestone for the city. It is an important moment that should be remembered and should be marked and celebrated. We can also talk about personal milestones, like personal achievements in your life. So when you graduate, when you finish your studies, that would be a milestone. Perhaps when you get married, or you have a child, or you buy your first home, anything that is really important to you and it happens in your life, that would be considered also a personal milestone. Final word we have down at the bottom here is cutting edge. Now this is a compound word, so it's composed of two other words, and together they form an adjective. When we talk about things that are cutting edge, basically we are talking usually about technology. It's usually about advances in science and technology. And things that are on the cutting edge are basically new, very innovative. And in this case, it's obviously talking about the introduction of autonomous vehicles, because this is totally new. It's never happened in human history before. So this technology is cutting edge. It's right on the limit of what is possible. Obviously, if we take the words independently, then we have the verb cut, which is something that it's an action we do with knives or with scissors. And edge is like the border of an object, the periphery, if you like. Okay, so there we have it. That was today's video. I hope that if you've enjoyed it, you will like this video and subscribe, please, if you want to see more in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.